These are 10 of my very favorite tools under $30 that I regret not knowing about sooner. And if you stick around, I'll show you one of the most popular tools under $30 I've ever shown on the channel as a bonus. Let's go. Number one on the list, in no particular order because all of these are absolutely amazing. This is a Japanese flush trim saw, and this one is made by a company called Suizan. I like this one because it's very affordable and it works extremely well. It's made with good metals and they last a long time. One of the things I like about this one is on each side it has different teeth. So on one side you have teeth for hardwood and on the other side you have teeth for softwood. And basically you have a coarse and a fine tooth depending on the side you choose. It's a nice little feature. This I use a bunch on flush trimming on dowels mostly. But I can also use this to finish a cut. Say if my cut didn't go all the way through and I still like just a little bit, I can finish up with this one so it doesn't tear the veneer, things like that on plywood. This is a really good one. It has a flexible blade so it lets you really get flush on your board so you can really flush off those dowel rods, which is where I use this the most. For under 30 bucks, it's a no-brainer. Next on the list, one of my favorite little tiny squares I've ever bought. This is the DFM Small Square, and what this is great for is finding center on boards as well as some other things we can use this for in the shop. It's literally handy as a shirt pocket. I like this thing, I use it all the time. Now what I like about it is it does come with these two pins that you can drop in, and then you can use that to find center on especially thinner boards where this really shines. In the center it is made for a mechanical pencil to go right in there so it doesn't move around and cause any inaccuracies. It works extremely well. And another thing you can do with this is basically use it like a small speed square. You can drop those pins on the bottom part and then you can ride it along the edge of the material and this will be perfectly square. I checked it against my woodpecker square, perfectly square, no issues there, just using those pins. There's no slop or play in those pins, so it works extremely well. Another thing this is useful for is if you're sharpening your chisels, you want to make sure those are perfectly square on the end. You can use this to check the square inside of small boxes, small drawers, a bunch of different uses for this little thing. Just pick one up, put it in your shop. Next on the list, by far the favorite tape measure I've ever used. I've been using tape measures since 1990-ish, probably before that, when I was a kid on the farm. Started construction in 1995 using the old Stanley, you know what I'm talking about. Everybody used one of those. This, though, is the Fast Cap old standby. I love this one. It's a 16-foot tape, perfect length for the shop. I love these. I have like 4 of these in the shop, but there's also another version that's a lefty-righty version, so you can read the tape from either side. And a lot of people, especially beginners, really like this version of the tape because it does have your increments marked on there if you're not quite familiar with how to read a tape measure. So like 1/8, quarter, 3/8, half, that sort of thing. If you're not familiar or comfortable reading a tape measure, this is a great beginner tape measure that'll really get you familiar with all of those fractions. I know us in America, we use imperial measurements. We're okay with that. If you're not using the metric system and you're okay with that, we're happy for you. One of the things I like about this tape measure is it has a pencil sharpener on there, so if you're using a regular number 2 pencil, you can sharpen that right there on the back. I do like that the blade kind of sets flush with this tape measure, so if you do happen to drop it, it's less likely to damage the end of that blade, which will bend, which will cause it to be inaccurate. Now, one thing I will tell you though, if you're using a tape measure in the shop for a project, I don't care if you've got 4 of these and they're exactly the same. Only use one for the entire project because some tape measures, depending on this blade on the end, can be off from each other. If you're trying to measure a 12-inch board, it may be 12 inches with this tape measure and you grab the exact same brand, it may be 12 1/8. It could be off that much, so just use one. Next up, everybody probably should have one of these. If you don't already, most people probably do, but these are 1, 2, 3 setup blocks. They come in pairs for less than $30. They're some of the most useful setup tools for your shop. You can use these as squares because they are absolutely perfectly square on all sides. And you can use these to set up the distance on your table saw fence because they are absolutely perfectly as we're going to get 1 inch by 2 inch by 3 inch. And because these come in pairs, you can use them in combination with each other. Matter of fact, this one comes with a connection kit and there's several other setup options you can do with that. I have a whole video on how to set this up. These are like 25 uses for these things. I'll link in the description. But for setting up a table saw fence, you can use these to set up 1 inch, 2, 3, 4, all the way up to 6 inches away from the blade, and it'd be perfectly 6 inches every time. And this is also useful for double checking the measurement is correct on your table saw alignment marker. So if you set it up at 2 inches, you put this 2 inches from the blade, then you look at the indicator, make sure it's exactly 2 inches because these are perfectly 2 inches or 3 or 1 or however you want to orient these. You can also use these to set up the blade height, bit height, things like that with these. They're extremely useful to have in the shop. They're also kind of weighty, so if you need a paperweight or just something to hold down one end of something, these work great for that as well. One thing I like to use the 1, 2, 3 setup blocks for is an offset at the table saw. For instance, if I'm making the 2-inch cuts over and over and over, what I can do is just use this setup block and set the table saw at 4 inches and then use the setup block as a 2-inch spacer, and then I'll be able to cut my 2-inch blocks because 4 minus 2 is 2. And I can just cut those over and over and over without having to worry about kickback. Because if you get those small parts jammed between the blade and the fence, if I was ripping them 2 inches, it could be a pretty bad day. Don't forget to stick around for the bonus of the most popular tool I've shown that's under 30 bucks. Coming soon. And to go along with those, next on the list, these are brass setup bars. I love having this set of setup bars for a specific reason. Well, several reasons, but the reason I like these more than the other ones I've had, these have the measurements etched into them. At a glance, you can tell that it's a half, a 3/8, a quarter, all the way down to a 1/16. So you can really use these to dial things in. I like these because you can use these to set up your bit heights and your blade heights, and you can use them in conjunction with your 1, 2, 3 blocks. If you need 1.5 inches, because this is 1, 2, 3, there's no 1/2 inch measurements on there. You can literally set this down on the flat side and then use the 1/2 inch setup block here to set up your 1.5 inches. You can do that by feel right on top of that blade or that bit, and in any increment in there you can add 1/4 inch to it, and then you have 1 1/4 inches, 2 1/4, however you need to set that up. This is a good combination for setting up your tools in your shop. Next on the list, pretty simple product that I wish I'd have known about sooner, are sanding mice. Sanding mice. This is a sanding mouse. You can get these in 2 packs as well. They work extremely well because they use any hook and loop sandpaper and they just loop on there or hook on there. These are great for just doing a little finishing touches, knocking off rough spots. I like to use these kind of as a final sand with the grain before finishing, and where they really shine, in my opinion, is if you're putting lacquer or if you're putting down poly, anything like that. This will really knock off some of that roughness before you put on the next coat. Of course, if you do use these as sand, you'll take a microfiber and wipe off any extra dust before putting your finish on. But these are really good for finish sanding and just knocking down rough spots. Like if you cut plywood, it's got a little splintering, you can use these to knock those off. If you use a regular orbital sander, a lot of times they're too aggressive, they'll cause too much damage, where these are more for fine sanding, and they just are cheap and they work. Next up, a very useful tool for almost any woodworker in any shop, and that is a ruler, but this one comes with 2 stops. Much like the Polini pocket rule. This is a 12-inch Polini pocket rule. This thing costs $55. Just the rule with 1 slide. This costs less than half that. 23 bucks for the 12-inch ruler and 2 slides. It's a stainless steel ruler, so you don't have to worry about it corrosion. These slides are aluminum. They come with a really nice brass knurled knob, so that brass, softer metal, it won't damage your stainless steel ruler when you snug it up. And you have those 2 slides, which you can do a lot of functions with. For one, you can do parallel lines to the edge of your board if you need to scribe those lines. You can set up a 2-inch by 2-inch notch if you wanted to cut that out of the end of your board, or 3-inch by 3-inch if you were building cabinets and you wanted that toe kick. You could also use this to set bit heights, blade heights, using the slide to set that height if you so chose to do that, or check the depths of holes, all kinds of stuff. And when you snug these up, say I wanted a 4-inch square line, I snug this up at 4 inches, I can scribe that line. It's perfectly square to the edge of that board. I check that with my benchmark square, as you can see here, nice square line. These are very, very handy to have in the shop. And at $23, it's a must-have. What I once called my grandpa's clamp. These are hand screw clamps. I seriously thought they were for old timers. I didn't even want one in the shop because I just thought that's what they used to use way back in the day, like in the 1920s. It's not true. We still use these in the shop, and since I've gotten these, they're super handy. The main thing I like these for in my shop, I don't have any vertical clamping capability on my assembly table, because most of us make an assembly table or an outfeed table. It's not necessarily a woodworking bench. Most modern woodworkers, I would say, don't have a true woodworking bench like a Shoresberg, whatever you call those, with those fancy clamps. They're really nice. I don't have one. This will help you take the place of that, because you can use these in combination to create vertical clamping on your workpiece. You can also use these to hold small parts if you need to drill into them at the drill press. You can use these to help you hold panels upright while you get everything else in place. So if you're assembling cabinets, you can also use these as stop blocks at the router table, just screw those down as a stop block. And because these 2 screws are independent, you can hold weird shaped pieces, things like that. Just a good all-around option to have in the shop, and they come in 2 packs for less than $30. Grab some. Next, Probably one of my favorite accessories, woodworking accessories I've ever bought, are bench cookies. I use these almost every time I build something or I'm in the shop doing various tasks, sanding, routing. They're absolutely great and they're very expensive. You get a 4-pack for less than $30. I think they're less than $20 actually. These are really cool because they have nice grippy pads on either side of them. I use them especially when I'm cutting or breaking down my sheet goods with the track saw. I can lay these under the material and then make my cuts. I also use these when I'm routing various pieces, trays, things like that, and sanding things because it keeps everything in place without moving. These are very nice to have. There's not a lot to say about them other than they're just awesome, especially for the price. However, some people prefer to use hockey pucks. They say they're kind of similar, but a hockey puck is slicker on the top and bottom, but you can absolutely use these if you want. I'll throw a link in the description to a 12-pack, I think. They're very inexpensive, but this is my Preds official game puck. Go Preds. One of the things you need in a woodworking shop is a way to keep your hands away from blades and bits, and I love these push blocks for that specific reason. These are the micro jig gripper block. They call these a smart push block, and I like these because they have 2 little feet on either end that will drop down and catch the back of the boards. These are absolutely amazing at the jointer, just for helping you push that board through. I also like these at the bandsaw. They're perfectly 90 degrees, so they have a foot on there that will help them stand up perfectly straight. Use these when resawing boards, absolutely great for that. And you can also use these at the table saw for regular push block operations. Router table, love these at the router table. All around a great option, less than $30 for one of these. I suggest picking up 2. These are some of the best push blocks on the market for those tasks. I love these things, use them all the time. Well, retail price on these are $35, but they're almost always on sale for way less than that. Currently, they're like 24 bucks, so just keep an eye on the price. If it happens to go over 30, just wait a little bit, come back, and they'll be under 30 because they stay under 30 all the time, like 99% of the time. I lost count. I think this is number 10, but if it's not, happy bonus to you, but there is another one coming after this, the most popular tool. If you're looking for a very good square that would rival any woodpecker square on the market, specifically the aluminum delve square from Woodpeckers, it's like 90 bucks. These are $30 a piece. I can't find them individually. If I find them, I will link them below individually, but they come as a set as $30 each, so it makes them right at 60 for both of these. They're both very nice, very useful to have in the shop. These are eye gauging bench squares. These are very, very nice, extremely accurate. You're not going to have to worry about any accuracy issues. They have a ton of features built right into them. If you remember the DFM Small Square I showed at the beginning of this video, it has a pin. This also has a pin, but it stores right in the end. Both these have very similar features, so I'll just go over the smaller of the two. The larger one also has the same features. You get scribe marks every 1/16 of an inch all the way up through there. I also like that they put the markings on the base here starting at 0, so you can use this to set up blades, bits, things like that. Just a really good option there. Again, it does have this stored pin that screws in so you don't lose that. It will drop into any of these holes so that you can use that to set up angles very, very quickly. It also fits really snug so you don't have to worry about accuracy issues. And then, of course, you can store it back in the end so you don't lose it, which is a good option to have. It also has an offset base, so if you're doing Morse and tenon, things like that, finding the center of boards, you can do that with 3/4 inch stock here. Whether you want to do Morse and tenon on one side, you can set that up, or on the other side, you can find the center of the board quickly using that offset base. These are really nice, very accurate squares, and again, about $30 a piece, and you do get the larger one and the smaller one. This is a really good combo to have in the shop for both of these. Another great thing about these eye gauge squares, they come in a nice case, good foam padding, so if you wanted to store these in a nice protected box, throw it in a drawer, not worry about them getting bunged up, there you go. Before we get to the most popular tool I've ever shown, I get questions about this every time I show it, every time I use the pencil on video. This is the Pentel Graph Gear 1000, I think. The lead size is 0.9. I keep this literally right here every day in my True Work pants. I love these pants. This is one of the best pencils. Yeah, it's about $9 a piece. You're like freaking out right now thinking, I'm not spending $9 on a pencil. Well, I bought 2 of these because I didn't want to spend $9 on a pencil, but I did, and I've kept up with both of them. It's absolutely a miracle. Because it's $9, I don't want to lose it, so I always stick it right back in that pocket. I have it with me constantly in the workshop. It's one of the better pencils you can buy. It's a mechanical pencil, so you can just refill the lead, and it fits nicely in all of these modern tools with these scribe holes that you can use for center finders, scribing with these squares. It's just one of those pencils that you just use all the time, and a lot of people will comment on these videos when I talk about this pencil and say they have them and love them, so you should probably check one out if you don't have one yet. Get some True Works, put it in the pocket, you'll never lose it. As promised, one of the most popular tools I've ever shown on this channel under $30 is a table saw accessory called the thin rip jig. Now you can get these anywhere between $25 and $35 depending on the model. I'll try to link to these $30 ones in the description. This is one of the most used accessories on my table saw when I need to cut thin strips. For instance, on my miter station I put thin walnut strips on the front just to give it a little contrast, as well as on my router stand. It just gives it a nice contrasting look. I like the look of it, and I use the thin rip jig to cut those strips out. They can be all exactly 1/8 inch thick, and it just makes things much easier when using on a table saw. If you don't have one of these, pick one up, you'll love it. If you like this video, you'll absolutely love all of those tools right there. You don't want to miss those. Click in that box, get you the big old virtual fist pump. Seriously, you gotta check that out.